Welcome back to the channel, Book Dragons. I'm so glad you're here with me today. I have a list of 13 terrific trilogies for you today, and I'm so excited to share them with you. The Lucky 13. And so we're going to get right down to it, and the first trilogy on this list just happens to have the word first in the title, and that is the First Law Trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. Guys, this is such a great series. It's grimdark, and Joe Abercrombie is known for really dark, morally gray characters, but it's got kind of a light-hearted air to it. I don't know, there's just something that's kind of light and fluffy about it, even though it's very dark and the characters are just despicable and the things that they do are just despicable and there's just atrocities happening left and right. But there's just kind of like a humorous tone that permeates the series. So while it is dark, and if you like grimdark, it's right up your alley, I don't know. It's not as dark and dismal as other grimdark books I've read. We'll put it that way. And there's some great characters in this series. Logan Ninefingers, Sandan Glokta. Glokta is my favorite character in the series by far. Such a great story, and I definitely want to continue in the world of the First Law. There are other books in the world, but the First Law trilogy is a standalone trilogy. You can read it, enjoy it, be done with it. It's good. So we're going to move on from the First Law trilogy to the number 2 spot. And by the way, these are not ranked at all. They're in no particular order. They just happen to fall in the numbered list, okay? So number 2 on this list is the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. I really like N.K. Jemisin. I've been very impressed with everything I've read from her, and the Broken Earth trilogy was the first series that I ever read, and it's very unique. There are times that it's told in the second person. There are times that the narrative is talking to you or talking as if it was you. So it's got kind of a different style of writing that you have to get used to. But once you get used to it, which doesn't take long, it's really a very, very good story. I highly recommend giving this series a try. It takes place in a dystopian world. It's probably more fantasy than sci-fi, but there are some science-y elements to it, I think, as well. It's just such a unique world and a diverse cast of characters. And even though there are 4 seasons in this world, just like our world, there's a 5th season that is cataclysmic and just kind of destroys the world every time there's a 5th season. And they kind of have to pick up the pieces and move on and rebuild civilization. It's such a cool concept, and I love the way N.K. Jemisin writes. So we're going to move on to number 3 on this list, and that is the Scythe trilogy by Neal Shusterman. That's right, guys. I absolutely love this trilogy. I've read all 3 books, and there is a companion book of short stories called Gleanings. I've not read that yet. There's supposed to be a prequel coming out to this within the next year probably that I heard about, so I haven't read that yet either, of course. But I'm really looking forward to it because this series was just so good. It is set in a utopian future, I would say. It's a science fiction saga, and it's set in a world where death and disease and war and everything has been completely eliminated due to the advent of an all-knowing, all-powerful, and beneficent AI. It's a very unique concept, and it takes a very positive outlook on AI, I felt like. The problem in this story is more the humans than it is the artificial intelligence. So I just ate it up, absolutely love it. and I think you would really like it too. It's a young adult series, but it's more on the adult side of young adult. It's definitely enjoyable by older adults as well, which I am. I'm an older adult. And I'm just so happy I read this. It is such a great story. So I'm going to set that down there. We're going to move on to number 4. And that, guys, is The Live Ship Traders by Robin Hobb. So far, this is the best series I have read from Robin Hobb. And it is the second trilogy in the Live Ship Traders series. And I'm sure there will be other great books in the series. I'm in the middle of the Tawny Men trilogy right now, and I'm loving it as well. But man, I tell you what, the Live Ship Traders series just was so good for me. Every single book worked great for me, and if you love nautical fantasy, and if you like unique magic systems, and you like dragons, oh guys, you have to read Live Ship Traders. Read the rest of the Realm of the Elderlings as well. I'm sure it's all good. Farseer Trilogy was good. I'm enjoying Tawny Man, but so far this has just worked perfectly for me. It's my favorite one in the series so far. So that is my number 4 pick, and now we're going to move on to number 5, and that is His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. That is The Golden Compass, otherwise known as the Northern Lights in some countries. Then there's The Subtle Knife and The Amber Spyglass. All 3 of those books are really good, guys. And if you've already read them and you haven't checked out the HBO miniseries based on the books, it is excellent as well. We don't talk about the original movie. It's just kind of disavowed among fans. But the HBO miniseries is really, really good. His Dark Materials follows a young girl named Lyra, whose father is bent on discovering the relationship between humans and dust. And there's a secret organization, kind of a religious organization, that is bent on eliminating dust. And it's really a powerful philosophical story. So if you like philosophical underpinnings in your fiction, it's so good, guys. His Dark Materials is a great series. Philip Pullman has written other books in the series. I have not read those, but I do plan to eventually. I plan to do a reread of His Dark Materials at some point as well. And the original trilogy is such a great tale. So now we're going to move on to number 6, and that, guys, is The Lord of the Rings... oh man, this is a heavy one. The Lord of the Rings trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien. And this particular copy is his illustrated edition, the ones with Tolkien's own illustrations in it. And guys, I absolutely love this trilogy. A lot of you may be upset that it's so far down on the list. Don't worry, like I said, this is not a ranked list. This is just a list. So don't get angry. It's on the list. That's what you should be happy about. This is the classic, the pinnacle of fantasy fiction, that every other work of fantasy fiction is probably inspired by in some way, shape, or form. You don't really need me to tell you anything about Lord of the Rings. You probably know all about it, or at least have some inklings about it. No pun intended if you know who the inklings are. Otherwise, just go about your day. So good, guys. I absolutely love Tolkien's masterwork. All right, and so now we're going to move on to number 7, and that is the Winter Night trilogy by Catherine Arden. I absolutely loved this trilogy. It is kind of a historical fantasy in a setting of Russian folklore and myth, and we follow a character called Vasilisa Petrovna, and she is a wild nature child in tune with the natural forces around her and the sprites and the mythological creatures that inhabit this world. She's pushing against the newer forces of Russian Orthodoxy that are coming in and trying to destroy the things that they find heretical. And it's just such a neat story. Some really cool magical creatures and characters. And I highly recommend this series to anyone. All 3 books are bangers, guys. I loved every single book in the series. And it's one that is shelf worthy for me. It's one that I want to own on my shelf one of these days, but I have to have a really nice, pretty edition of it. Otherwise, it's not worth it to me. So, the Winter Night Trilogy by Catherine Arden comes in at number 7. And then coming in at number 8, we have the Edan Trilogy by Philip Chase. This is a self-published series by Dr. Fantasy. If you know who Dr. Fantasy is, Dr. Philip Chase, he does have a BookTube channel. This is his baby. This is his story that he wrote. And this is The Prophet of Edan. This is the 2nd book in the series. I don't currently have the 1st book in the series in physical form, but I have the other 2. He was kind enough to give me the 2nd and 3rd books in the series in physical copies. And I love this series, guys. All 3 books are really, really good. The Way of Edan, the 1st book, is still my personal favorite, but they're all great. And for a debut fantasy series, guys, this is a must read. You must check this out and see if it's for you and see if it tickles your fancy. It's so, so good. So that's my number 8 pick right there. And then number 9 is the Rook and Rose Trilogy by M.A. Carrick. You can see here on my screen the cover of the 1st book, The Mask of Mirrors, and you probably heard of The Mask of Mirrors, but there are 3 books in the series. The Liar's Knot and The Labyrinth's Heart are the 2nd and 3rd books. And as you can see, the covers are absolutely gorgeous, and the story is just magnificent. It's really unique. It's really well plotted out. I felt so immersed in this world. It's almost kind of a Victorian-esque setting where you got the nobility and then you got the lower class. And the political machinations within this story are just really well played out, and you really feel the plight of the people that are considered to be the lower class. The magic system in this world is really interesting. Part of it's based in tarot and predicting futures and dealing with fate. And there's also a vigilante element to it. You've got a Batman and Robin kind of duo, but it also gave me vibes of Phantom of the Opera. So if you like Vigilantes and you like Phantom of the Opera, I think you would feel really at home in this particular world. Oh man, I just absolutely loved it. It was so, so good. And some of the many characters that I can remember from different books that I've read are from this series. They're just kind of popping up in my head every now and again, and I'm thinking about, oh wow, that was really cool when that happened. And so, you know, I won't spoil anything, but the Rook and Rose trilogy is fantastic. And the next trilogy I want to talk about now, coming in at number 10, is the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. Guys, if you like Asian martial arts stories and you like mafia stories, this is the series for you. It definitely gave me Godfather vibes, but it also reminded me of Asian martial arts films, whether it's classic movies from Bruce Lee or more modern martial arts movies. It was so good. And I think one of the strongest points of this series is its focus on family legacy, because you are following one particular family as the core family in the story throughout all 3 books. There are other mafia families in the story as well, and different regions that pop up in the story, but the main crux of the story is the characters and the legacies that these characters are portraying throughout the course of the story. It is just so well done, and it moved me to tears so many times for different characters in the story, and I am just so happy I read it, and I think you should definitely check out the Greenbone Saga if you have not already. Alright guys, so we are down to the last 3. Coming in at number 11 is the Dispatcher series by John Scalzi. Now, this series started out as an audiobook only. It was exclusive to Audible. They have since released ebook copies, and I'm pretty sure there's physical copies as well now. But I think he had a deal with Audible where it was exclusively audio for like 6 months or something like that. So I'm not sure. But it is currently a trilogy. It may have more books in the series. I don't know. I've heard that he's talked a little bit about possibly more books in the series, but right now it's a trilogy, and I highly recommend it. The main character is a dispatcher, and what a dispatcher does is they kill people who have maybe had botched operations or things like that, and it sends them back to a previous moment in their day in a location that they are comfortable in, because in this world death has stopped happening. So when people die, they aren't really dead except in certain very specific circumstances. And so the main character is one of many dispatchers who is hired by different corporations and certain wealthy people, and in some circumstances not so wealthy people, to make sure that they are not left in a state of dying that is going to cause them pain and suffering, so that when they pop back into that certain location, they'll be ready to go again. And hopefully, maybe if they had a botched surgery, they can go back and have the surgery done properly, things like that. My explanation of it is a little convoluted. I understand that. But it's one of those series that you just have to experience. It's not something I can really tell you in a proper way. You just have to experience it. So read it, The Dispatcher by John Scalzi. And coming in at number 12 is The Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell. This is a historical fiction retelling of the Arthur legend. And retellings of that legend are great because we don't really know how much of it is based in historical fact, if any. So any retelling of the Arthur legend is going to probably be considered historical fantasy. The Warlord Chronicles is fantastic. It's told in the third person from Derval, who is a Saxon that has come under servitude to the warlords of England, and he is telling the story of Arthur from a first-person point of view. I highly recommend doing the audiobooks for this one. They are narrated by Jonathan Keeble, and he is absolutely brilliant in his narration. So I hope you'll check this series out. If you love the Arthurian legends, I definitely think you will like the Warlord Chronicles. It's just amazing. And guys, the final trilogy on this list is the Millennium Trilogy by Stieg Larsson. The first book, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. The second is The Girl Who Played with Fire. And the third is The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest. There are other books written in the series, but not by Stieg Larsson. He died shortly after the third one was published. The others I have heard are not as good. They're kind of disavowed by hardcore fans of the trilogy. But guys, you absolutely need to read the original trilogy. At least give the first book a try. It is just such an awesome thriller. It's a psychological thriller, and there are a lot of horrific elements to it. I would say trigger warnings for sexual content and violence. But guys, so good. This is a must-read in my personal opinion. Even though the story starts out focusing on the character of Mikael Blomkvist, it becomes apparent early on that the real main character of this story is Lisbeth Salander. This is her story. She is such a unique and interesting character, and I personally think a very lovable character, but you just have to get used to her to discover that for yourself. She's an anarchist. She hates people. She has lots of trauma in her past that she has to deal with throughout the course of the series. And the things she does to people are just horrific sometimes. but she has such a brilliant mind. And oh, I just love this series, guys. This is definitely a terrific trilogy, and you need to read it. So, that is the last book series on my list of terrific trilogies. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of my list. Let me know some of your favorite trilogies that maybe I should check out if they are not on this list. Maybe I've heard of them and I just haven't read them yet. Maybe I've read them and they just didn't make my list. But let me know in the comments below. And guys, until next time, I hope you will be reading more books, and I will chat with you soon. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank my patrons. I really appreciate your support of the channel, and I thank you for all you do.